Hi guys. Sorry I'm a couple minutes late. So what I'm going to be painting today is I'm going to be painting a Wolverine, and I'm just going to talk to you through how I usually do it because one of my specialties, I guess, is a portraiture. I do a lot of portraits, and I'm just going to talk to you through the process and how I personally do it. This is not a tutorial, so I wouldn't be giving you step-by-step instructions or specifically instructing you on how you can do it yourself. This is more of just to see how someone else does it. So I will be, again, doing Wolverine, and what I personally usually start with is I start with a very rough sketch. Like you can see right here, I'm going to add a bit more light, so hopefully you can see it better. I usually start with a very, very rough sketch. As you can see, there are just a few lines here. It is not a detailed sketch. And once I have the rough sketch, then I switch it to detailed sketch. So the next thing I'm going to do here is we're actually going to dive into details. And just to answer for those of you who might be wondering, I am not doing this from memory. Memory is not that good. I am looking at the photo, and I'm going to show you in a second the photo reference that I'm using here. Let me quickly send it to myself on my phone from my laptop, so then I can show you a photo reference that I'm using here. And then what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be doing watercolor for this, just because I find that, again, I guess for the time thing, watercolor is generally faster than acrylic. So if I were to do this acrylic, it likely will take me, the events that we teach, we try to keep around maybe 2-ish hours mark, but if I were to do it by myself, it will take me much longer. And the only reason why, not because I'm a slow painter, I'm actually a really fast painter. The only reason why is because I wouldn't be on a time limit, and I would want to be taking my times, especially if it's a commission. I would want to get it perfect. So I would be taking hours upon hours upon hours, getting every detail right. And if you rush through it, portraiture, you can't rush through portraiture, especially if you're trying to get a very particular person, not a person, the person. Like if you want to get 100% likeness, you have to take your time, because one wrong brushstroke or one wrong move can really ruin it for you, and will take you much longer fixing it again. So let me show you the picture that I'll be working with. This is my reference photo. So I always work from reference photo, never from memory, because memory is deceiving. Oh, sorry guys, now you know my workout preferences too. So memory is deceiving. So that's why it's good to always have a photo reference. And this one I chose because, do you see, it's very monochromatic. I would say it's just a few different colors, right? So we can potentially even attempt this in color. Doesn't really matter. I personally love black and white as well. I find that it's really nice to start something with black and white, and you can always add color later. Once you have everything done, you can just add a brushstroke or two of color, and it just makes everything pop. So yeah, that's why I like choosing images that could be done in black and white easily, like for example this one. So let's start. I'm going to start by actually finalizing my details, because as you can see, this is a very, very rough sketch. There is nothing much to it, and we can't really start painting when it's so rough. So I'm just going to take my pencil and I'll go ahead and I will start working on certain areas. The eyes are a very big part here, so let's work on them a little bit. But what are you really doing? You're just comparing. You compare a piece by piece, piece by piece. And of course, that's after laying proportions. That's why I always start with a rough sketch, because you have to get proportions right. No matter how good you can be at details, if your proportions are wrong, you screwed it. So that's why you always have to start with the large chunks. How big is the head? How wide is the head? Where the shoulders positioned? Where are the hands positioned? We have to position everything first, and only after that we can move to details. If we start with details, we're not going to get proportions right. You have to get the bigger picture first before you can move to things. But because we do have a bigger picture, it is time to move to small things. So again, I'm going to start with more of visible features, such as around the eyes and those really visible wrinkles. We're not going to add the small ones just yet. There is a vein going through here. And another thing sometimes what I do is, just to help myself understand what's dark, what's light, I would just lightly add a pencil to them. So not a lot. I'm likely going to get rid of it later, especially if I'm using watercolor. With acrylic, I probably wouldn't get rid of it. I would just keep it because you can't see it. But because watercolor is a little more transparent, it might be a good idea to get rid of it first before we move to actual painting. All right, we'll add a piece right here. Doesn't have to be that detailed there. And guys, if you have any questions along the way, feel free to ask. I will be happy to help you with anything that I can. Now, how is everyone doing tonight? What is everyone up to? All right, so he's a bearded guy. So all this is going to be beard. And here it disappears into the distance. So we don't really have to sketch that part, but it wouldn't hurt to sketch it as well. So all this is hair, even if we can't see it. Okay, let's move to our nose part. All right, again, we know where the dark, where the light is. Even though we can't really see a lot here, remember the sides of the nose have to be the same, right? He doesn't have a weird nose where one side is completely different from the other. So even though there is a shadow and they don't really look the same because of how the light hits it, we have to remember that they really are. So they should have the same structure on each side. Our eyes can really deceive us sometimes. So when we sketch and we want it to be proportional, we have to use our brain more than our eyes, really. And just think what would be where. All right, now two sides are this and this. If I connect everything, would be about the same. So this is good. This is a good sign. It means everything is proportional. And again, we can get rid of all the extra lines before we move to our actual painting. So if you feel like you have some extras, well, actually I have some extras, that's okay. We'll get rid of that later. All right, now this side, I wouldn't be putting a harsh line here because you see it's very transparent shadow. So we don't want to do harsh lines. We kind of want to just lightly map it for ourselves, and then we'll define it more with transparent paint. So just very, very lightly. Even though it's pretty dark, but again, we're gonna do harsh lines there. Now let's move to our other side. This is a pretty harsh line, so we're gonna add it as harsh as it should be. And on top of that, there is another line right here. It's not very visible, but it's there. And there are a couple areas that have more of like lines shooting up. Do that as well. Okay, that's hair, beard again, hair, ear. More hair. All right, that is looking pretty good. Now let's move to the next area. So here, let's go to the hairline. We don't have the hairline just yet. So we're gonna add hairline. This is gonna be shadow. And again, you don't have to be too specific with the hairline. I would make it pretty light and I will likely erase it before we even move to our paint, because again, I don't want to be too caught up with how the hair goes. I'm more interested in face here versus the hair. Let's make his hair point up a little, because you know he has that haircut where his hair is like really pointing up, so we'll do that. All right, second eye. So this eye you can hardly see, but again, we have to assume that his eyes are the same. So whatever is here has to be there. They cannot be just slight touch visible. We may not paint the entire thing visible, but it has to be structurally sound. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna mirror this to this side, even though it isn't visible, and that's okay. We will cover it with shadow later. We just need to know that everything is good structurally. All right, so this looks about right. There will be an eye going here. But again, we don't have to do that because there's shadow there. And there will be a portion here. And again, we're not going to see that because there is shadow there. But it is good to know where it would have been. All right, that is satisfactory. So we're going to add a couple of wrinkles here, which means I'm going to remove some of the sketch. And add a few lines there. And right here again, how we did lightly there, we're gonna lightly add where a shadow gonna go. And this shadow looks like it is lower than the shadow because there's just more shadow there. So we're gonna put it a little lower. We'll bring it here. There's like a little section of open. You see there's a little light section. With watercolor, you always work from light to dark. So for anything, if I was doing with acrylic, we can always add those lighter sections later. We would probably work in this actually from black to white if we're working from acrylic. But with watercolor, you have to work from light to dark. So everything that's light, you have to sketch right away because you can't add it later. Well, technically you can if you use acrylic or ink, but if you're just trying to stick to one medium, and like a true watercolor, you want to perfect your technique. You really want to add it right away so you don't have to add it later with a different medium. All right, this is, yeah, let's get in there. We can start adding watercolor super soon. All right, so we have the top. It's pretty, it's a great map for us to add where to add what. And again, if you need to, if you're getting confused with your own lines, if let's say you decide to do this by yourself, you can always just add a little bit of pencil marks to know what's dark sections, what light sections. And again, I do that sometimes too. I find it very helpful. All right, now there's a shadow underneath the nose that hides a lot of the bottom part. It goes like this. And again, if it's confusing, add a couple pencil strokes there. All right, lips. The lips are hardly visible, really. There's just the inner line that's mostly visible, and there is a beard, but again, we wouldn't be doing a full-on outline for beard. You can just add a couple small lines, and mostly we will do the beard with actual paint. All right, all this is beard, 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 beard. There is a little bit of just the facial structure. And then again, lots and lots of beard. And we don't need to sketch all our beard again. There is no point in that. Just where it starts, where it ends, the rest will be done with our brush. So let's quickly map out where the shadows go here. Done. The rest is dark again, so all right, so, and the rest is pretty much beard. Beard, 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 beard. Again, we're just gonna try to copy the beard line from the other side because it's supposed to be somewhat similar. We don't wanna give him a complete different face shape on two sides because that doesn't make any sense. All right, our face for him is done, or at least we've done the sketching part. We've done enough. Now let's add a little bit to our body. So here you can't really see much. You can see the line here, but you can see the hand and the muscle. So we'll work with what we can see. You can see this. You can see that there is another muscle comes in here, this one. Then this muscle comes in here. It really is all about comparison. It's looking here on the same spot, looking there on the same spot. And trying to figure out what's where and why. And also it has to be, again, structurally sound. Because it's not just about weird lines and putting your lines properly. It's more about it's being anatomically correct. Because even if all your lines look somewhat right, but something is out of whack and it's not anatomically correct, that's a big problem. All right. His hand. Knuckles. Their fingers following that. And let's straighten up those guys. And of course, we'll erase everything that's underneath them. All right, that's great. I'm kind of going to keep this like that, very not detailed, because I don't really need it. Those are not detailed lines. It's just like a darkness coming out. So there are muscle lines, but they're not very detailed. So I feel like this is more than okay for a sketch. Let's just sketch this hand, shoulder, and we can move to actual painting. And guys, from being an artist for many, many years and working with younger artists and teaching art, the biggest mistakes that people who are just learning portraiture can make is getting too hung up on details. Again, you can't just get lost in this one piece and forget the entire hand. It has to be all going from the bigger to smaller, 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 smaller. Otherwise, you're going to be in trouble. All right, and the rest we'll figure out with paint there. That's pretty much all we need to know for this part. And the only part that we have left is shoulder that we don't have just yet. So this very important part right here. All right, again, the rest can very well be done with paint. We don't have to sketch it. So this is all that we needed from our sketch. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to find a good eraser, which should be somewhere on this table. I'm going to lighten up my lines, and I'm going to move on to my watercolor. So I'm going to bring all those items. All right, I got water, I got eraser, and I got my watercolor, and I even got watercolor pencils just because, why not? I have them, so let's see if we should use them. All right, and I got a couple brushes. So as far as brushes, I'm going to be using all my pointy brushes as always, because pointy brushes are best, absolutely best for watercolor, but also for portraiture. I personally really love, well, I would use in acrylic sometimes square brushes for portraiture as well, but never for watercolor. Watercolor is always, always pointy brushes. Not that you're not allowed to use square ones. If that's your thing, fine. It's just not something that I want to do. And again, as I mentioned earlier, now I'm going to lighten up some lines. And the reason why is, again, watercolor is very transparent. So there are certain sections that I need to keep light because I will see my paint through. I will see my pencil through paint, and I don't want to see my pencil through paint. So we're kind of going to do this in sections. I'm going to start with a face, and then I'm going to move to the rest of the body. And the last thing I'm going to do is this dark background. So I'm going to start with the face, body, dark background, and then I'm going to merge everything into darkness by adding darker sections. So I'm just going to use, do you see the large side of my eraser? they're still there. They're just not as your face kind of visible and not as pencil-y. They look more faded, which is great for underlay for watercolor. So now we're going to start building this. I'm going to start by actually going on to, well, let's start with something like this. I'm going to use number 2. And I'm going to take my black paint. I'm going to put it here. And I'm going to start by just adding dark sections. I'm not going to go as dark as I'm supposed to. I will add darkness to it later. I just need to not lose them again. So that's why I'm starting by adding them. So I just know where they are located. And watercolor is very layering paint. You can layer it many times. It only gets better from layering. So this is not, it's not bad to have to go over certain section 2, 3, 4, 5 times. It's actually good. Something that you want. And I might even blend this a little. Man here. All right, I need paper towel, guys. One thing I forgot. Here it is. Grab the paper towel. Great. All right, let's continue mapping this. And again, this is not the darkness that is going to be in the end. This is much lighter than that, but it is a great starting color. You don't want to start with something that's as dark as the end product, because just in case you make a mistake, you're going to be in big, big trouble. And also, it's good to have those sections, even though they look super solid on the actual image, it's good to have them not so solid and not so, sorry, English language is leaving me right now, not so equal. You want to have sections that are darker, you want to have sections that are lighter. And if you just start with one dark color, you're not going to get that effect. To get that effect, you have to start with a lighter color than your end color. We're going to darken it up much, much more. And you see, even here on that little piece, I added 2 layers and it already looks darker. All right, let's spread this a little. Because we can. That's the only reason why we're going to do it now. So you can cover that. You see, I'm using a lot of the time just straight water to spread my paint. All right, other side, I'll take some paint, actual watered down paint, not just water. And we'll just spread it a little. And another thing, guys, I am not using the best watercolor paper out there. I'm using actually very cheap watercolor paper, but doesn't really matter. You can use any watercolor paper anytime. But the benefit of having good watercolor paper is that your paint doesn't absorb as fast. And what it gives you ability to maneuver it for longer. With bad watercolor paper, or not as good and kind of worse quality, more of a non-professional, I would say it nicely, watercolor paint. Thing is, it absorbs paint really fast. So if you don't get to work fast on it, you're not going to be able to do this transparent layers like I'm doing right now, because your paint will just absorb, and that would be the end of it. If you want to be able to maneuver it, it's good to invest in a good quality watercolor paper, or you have to work fast. If you're a fast painter and you're on it, and maybe you've done this a couple times, then it doesn't matter. You can use any watercolor paper. But regardless, you'll still find the better watercolor paper easier to work with for that exact reason. All right, I'm gonna take more paint here. Spread it here a little. It's just straight water. And it's gonna be darker there, so we don't really have to go light here, but for our first layer, I prefer to go lighter. And also, I haven't really decided where I'm gonna take this in the end. I might like it halfway through and be like, okay, I'm done. I like it. I don't want to change it. And that happens really often. Sometimes I just arrive at the point of painting where that's not where I was going with it, and I was going much, much further, but I love it. So I don't want to add another brushstroke, and that's okay. It's okay to finish while you love it, whether that's the place where you're hoping to go or not. So do you see we're just adding those light layers very lightly. Let's add some darker one. This is why I wanted to make the hairline extremely transparent, because as you can see, I decided to change my mind and go slightly different direction, and that would happen. So that's why the lines, another reason actually that lines have to be light, because you want to give yourself ability to change your mind. Art is a process. You're not stuck with your original decision. You might get inspired to do something else, or you might feel like, oh, this is kind of cool. I want to continue with this direction. And that's fine. You should do that. And again, guys, if you have questions, ask away. Anything art related, doesn't have to be related to this particular painting. You can ask anything that you want in regard to portraiture, any painting styles, whatever is on your mind. Because we still have a long way to go, so we might as well discuss some art. So do you see for the beard, I'm using slightly different technique. I don't want it as blended because it needs to have those hair strokes. But also it's okay to have a first layer more blended if you want. That's totally your choice. But for the next couple layers, you would always want to add at least a few of those hair looking brush strokes. All right, so we're getting onto this section and we're going to blend it into existing. Because if you don't, it's going to have that line, the separation line. And even though we're going to darken it up even more later, we don't want that separation line. So let's blend it. And I'm going to add a bit of brush strokiness to the side. All right, that's a good start. Let's add this to you. Okay, now that we've mapped out some dark lines, we're actually going to work a bit more on the lighter lines, and it will mess it up in a way. And what I mean by that is that it's going to look less distinctive. It's going to be less contrast, and that's okay. It's a part of the process. We have to go through it because there are only a few areas that are actually light. So let me show you on this picture Do you see? Even though they all look fairly light, this part, like for example, nose, is lighter than the cheek. So if nose and cheek the same color, it doesn't translate like they are actually different and that light hits nose better. The same with this, there are areas here and here and here and here and here. They're actually lighter than the rest. But if we don't add those light tones on slightly darker sections, we're not gonna be able to see that those areas are actually lighter. So now we have to go with a very, very light color, with a layer of something super light to add to those sections. So I'm going to water down. I'm going to use pretty much a dirty water for this. And I'm going to go right here. There's a vein here. You see how light it is? That's important because, again, it's all about layering. If we want to make something darker, we can always. But we cannot make it lighter. We cannot take it back. So we have to work as careful as we can. And that would be pretty much the same if you're using the same technique, even with acrylic paint. All right, this I'm going to color the entire thing and the eye as well, because nose and the forehead actually beat the eye in lightness. Here I'm going to add a tiny little area that's light, and the rest I'm going to darken up a little as well. Okay, do you see now we got midtones going on, which is great. This is the first layer of midtones and those light shadows. Okay, let's go on the other side. We'll add some right here too, because right now this looks a little too light for this particular painting, and in the middle too. And this section is actually super light, not the ear. Ear is pretty dark inside, so could do that. All right, great. Now we're gonna add some midtones. So I'm gonna go slightly darker, not too dark, just slightly darker. So I'm gonna go right here. And remember again, these are not the darkest colors. The darkest colors we're still yet to add. Have not added them just yet. They're coming. And I would want to spread that. So I'm going to wash off my brush. And with a clean, slightly wet brush, I'm just going to spread it. And you see how it created this really light blending going down. All right, let's go on this side. We'll add a bit more tones here. Again, we're just darkening it up. We're going to do a lot of that. And we'll blend it right away. So again, I washed my brush. I lightly dabbed it on my paper towel here, and I'm going to spread it. Great. The same right here. I'll spread it a little because this section is not supposed to be this light. It's supposed to be darker. Not very dark, but darker. And we'll continue going down and darkening everything that needs to be darker, but not with the darkest color just yet. And again, if it needs to be spread it, spread it. As you can see, we're building intensity as we go. Right, let's get here. Beard, all those dark sections here. So layers upon layers upon layers upon layers. Okay, let's add some beard. We haven't added any beard yet. Oh, sorry, I mean mustache. We haven't added any mustache yet. We'll add just a little bit lightly first. I'm actually going to use a lighter color for that. Oh no, that's even too dark. Let's go lighter. Oh yeah, this is good. You see, I added some brush strokes there. And of course, we're going to move to darker color right after. We'll go on to our beard again. Let's blend this in a little. All right, and I think we're ready for our dark colors now. Because we already have a lot of midtones, we have a lot of everything, except we don't have dark colors. The only other place where I really want to add a midtone would be somewhere around this eye. So there is nothing going on here yet, but I really want this little waterline here. So we'll add that. Great. Now we can move to our dark color. So I'm going to take a pretty intense black at this point. And I'll go back right here and I'm going to add next layer of this. And again, because watercolor is quite transparent paint, sometimes, even when you use a fairly dark version of that, it may take you a few layers. Likely it's not going to be a one-layer job. It can be. I'm not saying it can't, but it's just not likely. And that's what's going to add a bit of more contrast to this too. And to create a softer look right here, I'm going to blend this right away up. And then I'm going to move back to my dark color. And let's bring it down here. And again, once we have it, let's soften it up. So wash off your brush, just soften up this part. Great. Now I'm going to go with this darkness on the other side. I really should have started with that side. That way I wouldn't have to hold my arm without hold my hand. I would be able to just put it on the canvas, but didn't think that through, and that's okay. It's not a big deal. It doesn't really matter which side you start with. Remember that eye, we can actually hardly see. We can just see a smidge on the actual picture. So I'm going to show it to you again, so you know what I'm talking about. The only reason we added it is to be structurally correct. Do you see there's a tiny touch that we can only see here? Don't really see much. So that's why it's always good to like dim it up a little bit. Good. I'm glad you guys enjoying this. So glad to hear this. All right, and let's get, after we have that, I'm gonna add darkness around because there's still darker spot right here that we don't have just yet. Again, another layer of darkness. Then we'll spread it down. We'll spread it here. A little bit here as well. Kind of feel like this chunk of nose is a little too light for this. So I'm gonna cover it very lightly. I'm gonna dim it up a little bit. Do you see now it makes more sense because it was competing in lightness with this middle of the nose, and middle of the nose is much lighter. So it makes sense to add a half tone there just to dim it a little bit so it's not so in your face kind of bright. All right, let's continue going with dark color here. And after that, guys, if you actually want to give it a try, go for it. All right, let's darken up this section here too. Good. He's getting better and better and better. And let's go here. There's not enough darkness here just yet, so we'll add some. And again, we'll spread it just a little. We'll darken up the top, that hairline. And the ear here inside. Now let's add it on to the other side. We'll start with hair strokes there. We'll add a little bit of that because we don't have any of that yet. We don't have any hair movement, so why not, right? Right, I'm gonna darken up the mustache a little bit right here on the side. I think my beard is quite good. I don't really need to be darkening it up. It's pretty dark as is. So, face is almost done, but now we have to look at it in a context of the other things because we don't have anything around it just yet. So for us to have a better perspective of what it's going to look like, we have to start laying background colors and the rest of the body color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my large brush, and I'm not going to go with a straight black, but I'm going to go pretty dark. And what I'm going to start with is I'm going to add a section here. You see all the way, but leaving a little bit of white canvas, sorry, not canvas, paper in between my painting the brushstroke to indicate that there's a highlight there, that the light is hitting it from that side. Because you see the light is hitting it from that side and on a beard as well. I will leave a little sections here and there. And again, I'm going to blend that into the background. And here, you're going to try to make it as smooth as possible. May not end up perfectly smooth, but as smooth as possible is good. So that's one side. You can even darken it up a little right here if your paint is still wet. Well, I mean, I know you guys not painting with me, but I am saying that because in case you want to ever do that, so you know how to. All right, you see, it's getting better. It's having more movement, it's having more character. I might even blend the hair just a little here to merge the background and the face together a little more. Yes, to answer your question, I do refer to my photo the entire process. I actually have it open on my screen. So as I'm seeing the video and your guys' comments, I'm also looking at the photo because I find that I can enlarge it better on my laptop screen versus the phone. And I can see the entire image on my laptop screen versus the phone. The phone, when I enlarge it, I can only see chunks of it. And I prefer the entire image. So, but I am referring to it the entire time because this is next to impossible from memory. When you're trying to merge it and blend it and just choose the style, you don't have to refer to photo. But when it comes to details, photo is necessary. So I'm going to go on to the other side now, and I'm going to add some darkness here. So again, right around the eye here, sorry, not the eye, ear. And here the ear is so light that we don't need to leave that section off. Highlight, I guess. We can add it, but I will add it around beard touch. Do you see I added a bit of white? I kept some white there. So it looks like there is a bit of highlight on a beard, but you don't have to technically leave that. And I might even get rid of that later. I'm not sure. I just want to give myself that option. And now I'm just going to take some and I'll spread it with water. All right, that is going good. So that was my large brush. I'm going to put it away now, and clearly why the large brush, because we're working on a large areas, and if I did this with a small brush, I'm going to end up with a very messy section here. It's not going to be as wide and beautiful and flowy. That effect you can only achieve with a large brush, so that's why I use the large brush there. Now let's move to our neck and hands, and of course the face here is a centerpiece. It's not the shoulders. Those are just supporting elements. So we have the centerpiece. Now we have to make this work for it. We don't want to take away attention from the face. So we may not go as dark. Let's see. Let's start with lighter and then see how that goes, because you just never know. All right, so I'm gonna go with this brush. This is number 8, and by the way, my large one was number 16, as big as it gets. Maybe it gets bigger, but that's the biggest one I have. And I'm gonna go on to our hands and chest section here. And I'm gonna, of course, enlarge the image on my screen here, because again, you just have to refer to it. It's not a from memory kind of job. If you're painting a person, you can do it from the memory. If you're painting the person and you need it to be specific, do not do it from the memory. It's just not a good idea. Because everyone is unique and different, and painting someone specific from the memory may not result in a perfect likeness. So I'm gonna add some shadows from there, because he does have a lot of muscles that are going that way from the neck. And it also is good to kind of blend them a little on the end so they don't end abruptly. And while this is still wet, I'm gonna add some from the chest out too. So from here out. And again, I will blend them just a little. And let's go a little darker. I kind of want to darken it up a touch. And while everything is still wet, I can do this on wet and it will spread properly. So it's perfect. All right, and I'm gonna spread this a little more here. Because he has quite a bit of chest hair, so it would be darker there. And I'm not gonna paint every single hair, but we're gonna darken it up. And then let's move to our shoulders here. And again, we'll start by mapping them, just like we did with our face. So we take a medium color in a way, or fairly light color, and we're just mapping those darker sections. And if you want to spread them, you can. That's a good idea. Spreading never ruins it. You see, it starts having shape. right, I want to spread this just a touch as well, because again, spreading is good. All right, this is pretty good. Again, our shoulder doesn't have to be a centerpiece. It's not meant to. So I'm just going to darken up a little, but I'm not going to be really focusing on it because that's not my goal. My goal is to make it serve the face, not the other way around. All right, let's add a bit of a color on our hand. In hand, I would want to focus on even less because it's closer to the outside. And again, I'm trying to keep focus on top. So if I focus too much on the hand, it's going to take away a lot from the top sections. So that's why I'm not really going to focus on my hand too much, because I feel like it's not going to serve me well. And if anything, it can make it worse. And now we're going to add some color to this. I'm going to make sure there's still some white left here because I don't want to cover it all up, because again, remember the white is something we have to just leave versus adding it later on. Of course, you can always add it later on, but it is better to save it. So I'm going to save some white there as a glare. But I will also add even darker color there eventually. So this is good. Might even add darker color now, just a couple spots. All right, good. Let's move to our other side. I might even darken up some background here. Kind of want the shoulder to pop even more. All right, and now let's move to our second side. And here, I'm going to start by adding a bit further background. Just a touch. And let's work a little on the shoulder. Now we have to avoid our claws here. All right, this is a good backdrop. We'll spread it a little bit, just a touch. And then we're going to move on to our hand here. This hand is very, very dark around here. And now I'm going to add lines from here out. And I got a little bit of darkness to my hands, just a touch, to make them pretty dark. But again, I'm not going to be going too much into details, just the darkness. And I might add a bit more into the face. All right, and I am done. I'm happy with him. I think it's awesome. Of course, sky's the limit. We can continue working on it forever, and it will never be fully done. So this is what he looks like. This is our version of him, and I'm very happy with that. I love it, so I'm gonna sign him. Done. Technically, what we could do to make him a little more colorful is we could just choose one color, and let's say red or orange or blue or yellow, any color you can think of, or like 3-4 colors. Let's say yellow, orange, and red. We want to do that, and we can just add a flick here and there on medium to light areas to give him a bit more color and a pop art look. But I like him in black and white, so I think I'm gonna keep him in black and white. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, guys. All right, that's pretty much it. I hope you had fun. If you would like to attempt it at some point, go for it. Hope you learned something as well. I really hope this is helpful in one way, shape, or form. And thanks for joining me, guys. I had a great time painting with you tonight. Bye, everyone.